Hello, Dwayne.
I can hear you.
Yeah. I'm coming through clear.
Yes. But for some reason, I cannot see the chat. Okay. See if I can figure out a way around this. How can I get the chat window? Hopefully this will work. All right. It's about 12 minutes in, so we can go ahead and start. Start. All right, everyone, welcome to our next installment in the study of the new book, The Miracle Kit Behind the Power of Prayer. Let's start with prayer for spiritual workers, then we'll go into announcements, and then we'll pick up with chapter 10. Prayer for spiritual workers. Almighty God, I bless all those who, because of their limitations, would smite me. Almighty God, I bless all those who, because of their weakness, would not heed me. Almighty God, I bless all those who, because of their ignorance, would defile you through me. And I ask, Almighty God, O wondrous power, that your strength may be given to me now, so that I might be fortified by this, so that I might go forward bravely into the world, and despite reception, send forth my love of thee throughout all races of man. Almighty God, give me the power and strength to rise above my karmic weakness, the deficiencies in the pattern of my evolution, so that I might evolve and become stronger, I, and even stronger, in thy everlasting light. O God, thy will be done. All right, welcome everyone to study and celebration of the release of the new book. The author, Mr. Nehemiah Davis, The Miracle Kit Behind the Power of Prayer, the mystic knowledge of manipulating the subtle and cosmic energies of prana through prayer techniques. This is session 12, where we've been reviewing the book. We have chapters 10 today, which we'll probably get through. And then next session we'll pick up with chapter 11. So we're just about finished with the book. And then we will do a review of a couple of prayers in light of the information we just reviewed in the Miracle Kit Behind the Power of Prayer book. We will look at the New Lord's Prayer and the Prayer for Spiritual Workers, the Prayer for Spiritual Workers, which we just recited. We recite at the beginning of class, and the New Lord's Prayer, which we recite at the end of class. We'll take a look at those two prayers, do a bit of an analysis on them, and see how the science of prayer is introduced to us in the text, Miracle Kit Behind the Power of Prayers, is implemented and utilized in those two masterfully authored prayers given to us by the Master Jesus through the yogic mediumship of Dr. Shri Yogiriji George King. And then we'll finish up this series with a review of Chapter 9, the Mystic Prayer Technique, in a prayer technique seminar. And what we'll do is we'll come together and we'll apply the science of prayer by utilizing a couple of prayers, namely like the Prayer for Spiritual Workers, the New Lord's Prayer, and we'll also practice the 12 blessings. We'll come together as a group. We'll review Chapter 9. I don't know if I'll read Chapter 9 during that prayer technique seminar, or just go over a few highlights, but we'll still get the information as we practice the prayer technique together. So announcement for that will be coming soon. And as per usual, we continue our weekly services and commemoration services through the Florida group of the Dear Society. You can find more information about that on our MeetUp page. If you go to meetup.com and just search for South Florida Aetherius Society or just South Florida Aetherius, you'll find our group come up. You're welcome to join the group on Meetup and tune in to our services, which are held both online via Zoom and in person, as well as our commemoration services. Okay. So before we begin, do we have any questions or comments? Let me silence my phone so I'm not interrupted. Now, I am having some issues with the chat, so there may be a delay with me responding to your messages in the chat. But once they're posted and I see them and I get to an appropriate stopping point, the text, then I will read the questions and comments that you have in the chat. Welcome, Anatomy. Yes, so 2-week break. One Sunday, I think it was last Sunday. Actually, we just had a hurricane here a couple weeks ago. And then last week was my brother's birthday, and so I was not here for that. And we also had a hurricane threat. It didn't hit us directly in South Florida where we are, but it kind of went north to Central and North Florida. So we were spared, but there was a time there where we were all kind of on watch waiting. So we didn't have class last week. But barring any other weather formations and any other issues, we should continue with chapter 11 next week, which will finish out October. I don't think chapter 11 will take multiple readings. So hopefully we'll finish out October with finishing out the book. And then in November, you can hold the seminar. So that'll either be the 3rd or the 10th before the Thanksgiving holiday. So I would ideally like to hold the in-person seminar before the 17th, which is that third Sunday in November. So either the 3rd or the 10th. Let's see if we can get chapter 11, get chapter 10 done today, the 20th. Get chapter 11 done the 27th. And then on the 3rd, we'll leave that open for review, where we look at some of because in the PDF version that I have, the diagrams, illustrations are not very clear. So I wanted to hold a Q&A session to review those diagrams and illustrations, and also to allow anyone to ask any questions they may have, because we would have completed 90% of the book, with the only exception is chapter 9, which will hold for the Mystic Prayer Seminar. And so that would be, let's see, today, the 10th, 27th, the 11th, the 3rd, Q&A and review. So by the 10th, I'm looking at the 10th, Sunday the 10th of November, to hold the Mystic Prayer Seminar. And I don't know if I'll broadcast that or not. We're still determining how that'll work out. And then that'll close up the study and celebration of the book. And that'll bring us into the Thanksgiving holiday and then the holiday season. We may have a couple more sessions, but then, we'll generally close out for the year and pick up again January 8th. Wait, hold on. Is that January? January 5th or the 12th? And what I plan to do after we finish this series, Miracle Prayer Kit, is to go back and continue our review. Let me close this up. Continue our review of the earlier lectures that were given by Mr. Nehemiah Davis. So I believe we finished the Metaphysics 101, where I would transcribe the first 30 minutes of those lectures and then bring up some updated diagrams, illustrations. So usually during those lectures back then, Nehemiah would have two sources, well, three himself, counting as one, but he would also have two sources of illustrations. One would be he would illustrate information on the whiteboard. He would draw it some to illustrate whatever concept he was teaching in that time. And he'll also sometimes include handouts and that would have write-ups and diagrams that he had produced at that time. Those classes are about 10, almost 11, 12 years ago. He's updated a lot of his illustrations and handouts since then. And so I want my ideas to use those updated handouts in a review of those earlier classes, as well as give all of you an opportunity who weren't able to attend in person at the time, or maybe not even aware of those earlier lectures, to watch them, review them, and to ask any questions that you may have from that material. And then that will segue into hopefully a new set of lecture series that we hope to give out in the future that won't necessarily review or go over the same information that was taught in those earlier lectures, but will continue on with further topics and maybe some intermediate and advanced topics that build off of the information that was given in those earlier lectures. So that's kind of the idea, the rough plan for 2025. But if you guys have any comments or suggestions or topics that you'd like us to specifically cover, you're more than welcome to send those to us, and we'll try to fit those into any future offerings that we have. Okay. So is there anything you wanted to add, Nehemiah, before we start with chapter 10?
No, but we do plan to have the third book done by next year on the Mr. Constitution of Man.
Great. All right. So if there's no questions or comments, let's go ahead and start with chapter 10. Now, I anticipate finishing this chapter today. Let's quickly review. Yeah. But if I have to break it up or if there's questions, plenty of questions about the content we're covering or any of the metaphysically relevant questions that you have, you feel free to post those in the chat. And I won't try to adhere too strictly to a schedule. We'll kind of just go with the feeling of the group and see what we can cover and what we need to push to a subsequent session. All right, chapter 10, the flow of prana through prayer. I witnessed the radiant power, prana. One day, I was staring at the thick woody forest that was located directly in front of our house. This was a quiet afternoon in my neighborhood, which was a small rural agriculture community located at the southeast end of Miami-Dade County, Florida, the last city before you enter the Florida Keys. Many times I retreated to this spot in front of my house in the evening after my pranayama practices. This particular evening would prove to be a very eventful one. I was about the age of 14 when this event took place and was heavily engaged in psychic and spiritual development practices. I occasionally ended the day by staring at the woods after my daily yoga practice. I led a rather simple childhood life outside of my yoga and metaphysical training. On this particular day, I was awakened out of my trance-like stare by what seemed to be a warm beam of light that moved up and down my back. When I turned to look where this beam of warm light was coming from, I was astonished to see my older brother there, holding out one of his arms with the palm of his hand held open and the other arm and hand held in another mudra style that seals and redirects the prana within the body. My brother, Althea H. Davis Jr., had developed the ability to project concentrated beams of prana out of the palms of his hands, so strong and concentrated that it could be felt by my physical skin. I watched him move his arm up and down, which correlated with the warm beam of energy that I was feeling at the same time on my skin. As he moved his arm down, I could feel this warm beam of energy move down my back, and as he moved his arm up, I could feel the power going up my back. Althea, my brother, smiled as I stared at him as he directed this beam of energy to me with this mudra yoga technique that he used very effectively that evening. Of course, I immediately asked him to show me how he did this so effectively that I could feel this power as it left his hand. He explained to me that he developed this ability by using the mystic prayer technique for many years. Althea was only 19 years of age at the time, only some 5 years older than I was. This incident gave me confidence and the ability to dive deeper into the study and use of this mystic technique of prayer. From early childhood, all my siblings and I were trained in this form of mystic prayer and used it every day. My parents, on a daily basis, would not leave the house in the morning without having a family prayer circle, which meant the whole family gathering together in the living room area of our house, sending out prayer energy to the world. Let me say this again. We said prayers for the world, not for ourselves, but to the world to increase love, peace, and world healing. We also had family evening prayer services at least once to twice a week, which we call the 12 Blessings Power Circles, a group prayer technique designed by Dr. George King, the founder and president of the Aetherius Society. Althea, being the second oldest child, led the services at times, which put him in the position of having to exert greater efforts in manipulating the pranas through this mystic technique of prayer. One of the things I learned from my brother was that constant practice toward anything would bring results. Althea was an overachiever in his youth. He was very athletic, a martial artist, a bodybuilder, and a weightlifter. In his academics, he was in accelerated courses from junior high school through senior high school. He was always in college prep and college level classes throughout his last 4 years of secondary school. He had a high degree of concentration, which gave him the ability to develop and achieve many psychic feats. In this chapter, I will go into how to manipulate the flow of prana through prayer, which had me share the above story with you and stress the point of concentration in several chapters throughout this book. Moving the prana with concentration. Gaining understanding and knowledge on a particular subject gives you greater power over that subject. The knowledge of something gives you the ability to work with that thing you have knowledge over. The knowledge humankind gained over fire led us to many modern conveniences that we experience today. This knowledge led mankind to manipulate fire, heat, and steam, which gave us the ability to cook our food, to sterilize the water we drink, that resulted in healthier and longer lives. Further studies on fire led man to examine the various materials in nature that allowed him to manipulate fire further, under different degrees of operation, which gave him the ability to control fire even more, that led to many inventions such as better grades of iron, stronger homes, mechanical machinery, combustion engines, and automated factories. If you read these chapters in sequence, then you know that prana is everywhere. In fact, our total mental and physical human structure is built out of various degrees of prana or shakti. This thing or power that gives men the ability to mold and shape prana is his ability to control mind substance, which is an aspect of shakti principle. Which is an aspect of the shakti principle. Mental energy molds, shapes, and holds prana together, which formulates the objects and subjects within our manifestation that we see and experience throughout our lives. Mind and prana are forms of shakti that the soul, the I, uses to experience involution and evolution. The soul manifests an aspect of its being on various realms of consciousness by crossing or intersecting the positive flows of Shakti power and negative flows of Shakti power in order to bring about segments of consciousness. Tantra Sastra Yoga tells us that these streams or flows of positive and negative energies within the subtle body structures are the Pingala nadis and the Ida nadis. The nadic flow of energies moves from the base of the spine chakra up to the Christ chakra, creating a complex matrix of energies that holds consciousness in place. These nadis are terminated at the Christ chakra, where it creates the main sense organs in the head region that is used to sustain the embodied consciousness and create the communication pathways to the physical and subtle worlds through man's sensory perception. These energy flows are manifested in the physical realm through the right and left nostrils. They also flow through sensory perception. Man's consciousness is held in place on this physical plane by three major gross physical energy sources. Number one, the first major gross physical energy source is gaseous, airy energy. Man absorbs this through the intake of oxygen through the nostrils. The human body also exists in an air bubble of 20 cubic square feet in order to have perpetual breathing take place. The average human inhales and exhales 21,600 breaths per day. Proper breath control through the nostrils builds strong lungs and a good functioning circulatory system. Number two, the second major gross physical energy source is a liquid water energy type. The composition of man's physical body is over 70% water liquids. Man's water intake for the body happens through his mouth and passes through the stomach and digestive system, where it moves to the circulatory system and irrigates the other organs and systems of the body. The third major gross physical energy source is a solid food energy type. Man's intake of solid foods is the grossest form of energy intake. The intake of solid foods happens also through the mouth, stomach, digestive system, and circulatory system. Excuse me. In order to feed the body's organs and systems. The main flow of energy intake for sustaining consciousness for man is through his breath. The control of breath is man's ability to inhale, exhale, and retain breath. The proper operation of these actions determines the duration and quality of life for a person. Oxygen is a gaseous source of nourishment. Now, the most important intake of energy source is the breath. And this is clearly established by the fact that after 5 minutes without the intake of breath, man loses consciousness and the physical body dies. The second main flow of energy intake for sustaining the consciousness of man is through the consumption of water and liquid food sources. Without the intake of water for 3 days, the body will lose consciousness and the physical body will eventually die without water intake. The third flow of energy intake for sustaining the consciousness of man is through the consumption of solid food. Without the intake of food from solid food sources, the physical body will lose consciousness within 3 to 4 weeks, and the physical body will die. The intake breath on the physical realm is the reflection of the flow of prana throughout the subtle bodies caused by a series of continued mantric sound vibrations put in place through the soul's vehicle of consciousness, the kundalini. This sonic vibration streaming forward through and from the Kundalini is the sustaining life force of man. The soul of man uses a creative mantra sound vibration to bind and twist the Shakti power into Kundalini, the 3.5 knot within the Muladhara chakra, which forms the vehicle of consciousness for man. It is said that the creative mantric sound was an aspect of the AUM, which is the OM 3 times, a masculine sound vibration. Once the Kundalini is formed, it releases a sound vibration that sustains consciousness on several levels of existence in Maha Bindu cycles of the earth, sun, or moon. This mantric sound vibration is a preservational force, which is a feminine power expression. This negative form of mantric sonic vibration is said to be the Sanskrit power word HAMAS, which is the SOHAM mantra. Ancient scripture tells us that the soul repeats this mantra 21,600 times a day in order to hold the consciousness of several states of existence. In the physical, astral, and etheric realms, the power of this mantra produces the flow of energies called the Pingala Nadis and Ida Nadis. A positive and negative flow of Shakti power is released from the Kundalini, which is the vehicle of consciousness of the soul. These positive and negative flows of energy are manipulated by the soul with the mantra sound vibrations of HAMAS Sanskrit through and from the dormant Kundalini power in order to create segments of consciousness. These segments of consciousness, will of the soul, operates as an instrument used to draw down endless amounts of vital and mental pranas, while holding energies in various karmic patterns that assist the soul in creating several layers of subtle and physical expressions in time cycles that produce the necessary experiences for each evolution of the aspects of consciousness created by the soul. Therefore, a mantra is used to place cosmic energies in motion in order to bring about consciousness and place it in patterns of divided or segmented levels of consciousness. Consciousness formed by the will of the soul, the mantric sounds projected by the soul, and the flow of positive and negative pranas are results of the continued repetition of the mantra by the soul. The following table lays out the flow of energies that forms consciousness and the result of the flow of energies. Table 10-1. Did we forget to title this table? Looks like we did. Was it a mistake? Oh. Pingala nadis, Ida nadis, and consciousness. Pingala is a positive energy flow, Ida, a negative energy flow, and the intersection of opposite energies and major and minor and minute chakras or psychic centers of consciousness. Pingala is a vital energy of the right nostril and right side of the brain. Ida is a mental energy, the left nostril and left side of the brain. And the intersection of those two energies is a minute life of Sushumna conscious. Of the two nostrils is breath, a sustainer of life. Of the two hemispheres of the brain, produces thought, a receiving and transmission instrument of consciousness. The Pingala sense of perception is the right eye, ear, nose, hands, and the right side of the mouth. For Ida, sense of perception is the left eye, ear, nose, hands, and the left side of the mouth. And combine those sensory perceptions, we have sight, hearing, smelling, touching, and touch and speech. Welcome to everyone joining us today. We are going through chapter 10 of the text, The Miracle Kit Behind the Power of Prayer. We should finish that up today, and the next session we should pick up on chapter 11. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them in the chat, and I will periodically take a glance over and pose those questions when we come to appropriate stopping points throughout the text. Through pranayama, breath control, and concentration, we can increase the flow of these nadic energies and gain control over consciousness. The breath control pranayama techniques are designed to increase man's control over his consciousness. The theory behind the breath control techniques is to increase man's ability to control the flow of vital Pingala nadis and mental Ida nadis energies within the physical and subtle bodies. The nadic flow of energies originates from Shakti power that the soul has molded and shaped into structured states of consciousness. Number 1, the ancient teachings of Tantra and Mantra Sastra tells us that Kundalini is a vehicle of consciousness that was formed from the Shakti of Earth, Sun, and Moon, sacred configurations of Shakti powers, or Tattvic rays. The soul built this from the Shakti power, pulled down from the Mahabindu of Earth, and tempered by the Mahabindu of the Sun, Tattva rays, and the Mahabindu of the Moon, Tattva rays, then sealed the original passageway, Sushumna, that these Shakti powers travel through. The formation of the Kundalini power actually indicates, number 2, it actually indicates that the whole began the not whole. This means that the original vibrational state of Shakti, formulated by the soul to form consciousness, was split up into many parts or segments of consciousness. The great awareness of the soul experienced through the original state of Shakti consciousness could not be experienced in the not whole state because it is only a segment of the original state of consciousness. Number 3, the soul placed the greater portion of the power in a dormant state and split the remaining flow of Shakti power into 2 opposite flows of energies, creating a matrix of energy patterns. Number 4, this matrix of nadis fills the manifested casual space prepared by the soul to house the involved consciousness through its journey of evolution. This casual space is called the auric body or auric unit that stays with man throughout all his reincarnations, gaining the necessary experience that becomes the life energies of the auric substance called karmic pressures of life. The pressures of karma become these structured gauges of limitations placed on man's evolutionary path. The auric body houses the nadis. The nadis give formation to the subtle mental pranic bodies, astral bodies, and the physical body. The thoughts and actions generated from the subtle bodies and the physical bodies during its many incarnations create a collage of mental impressions, samskaras, on the layers of the auric body that originate from the residue actions. Now, these samskaras, or mental impressions, of man's thoughts and actions create restrictions or karmic pressures that manifest themselves as limitations of mental and pranic movements or accelerations of mental and pranic movements. These pressures manifest themselves by slowing down the nadic flow of energies that bring about various levels of consciousness in the subtle and physical realms. The basic conscious network that the soul brings about is already limited because of the levels of energy frequency that it chooses to work from, Muladhara chakra. The pranayama techniques are designed to lift and remove the karmic restrictions or pressures on the Pingala and Ida nadis that were placed there by man's wrong thoughts and actions. The breath control techniques and retention of breath techniques help to expand and increase the energy flow of the nadis, thereby giving mankind the ability to expand their consciousness. The subtle flow of Shakti power that is within the human structure is called the nadis. As stated earlier, the intersection of these two opposite energy sources produces various levels of consciousness. The auric substance that the nadis push through is a body of auric substance for the soul, which holds the original samskaras of individual manifestation that exerts the karmic pressures on the nadi formation. The body of the auric substance of the soul holds the bindu points of the Mahadevatas that give life through their express manifested grace for man's creative manifestation. The pressures of the auric body and the pressures brought about from the nadis formations of the matrices and expression through the vortex center present at the bindu points slow down and inhibit the flow of consciousness. The pranayama techniques increase the flow of energy components that formulate the basic structure or vehicle of man's consciousness, which serves to break the restrictions that inhibit the flow of consciousness. All right, let me pause here and see if we have and address the question we have. Okay. There's a question here. It says, when we see other people suffering, in which perspective should we see, or in which perspective should we see them? Should we show sympathy and help them, or leave them because they are suffering due to their own karma in this life or past lives?
We should always take the example of the great cosmic beings that assist us in every aspect of our lives. So we should always not only have sympathy, but take action to help and assist them in any which way we can, or the power that we can. I don't subscribe to saying that's their karma. And all the teachings that I have studied don't subscribe to that either. You know, you give your service, they take it or they don't, but you do your part. Because remember that the sun gives of itself always. The earth gives of itself always. The moon gives of itself always. The earth atmosphere gives of itself always. We can always take an intake of breath. We can always find water to drink. We can always find food to eat, because the earth is constantly creating food. The earth is a living being. You know, when you touch the earth, you're touching a mighty God, to us at least. When you feel the sunlight of the sun, you're feeling the mighty power of a tremendous ancient God that has control over trillions of lives. So they always give of themselves. And we share the consciousness of the whole. So we always must help. Always must help, always must push forward to serve each other, because that's what the great divine beings do. They always sharing of themselves, and they always giving of themselves without condition, without saying, I need something back. They just give. So yeah, so don't subscribe to that saying it's their karma. Because all of us are working out karma, all of us are trying to purify our auric bodies in order to gain more understanding and power. I hope that's clear and understandable.
Okay. Increasing the flow of prana through mudras. Another method that is used, albeit unnoticed or unknowingly by those who use it, is the age-old methods of mudra yoga. The evidence of this is the daily hand gestures of greeting or leaving a person. These gestures are a method of manipulating subtle, unseen energies that yields very noticeable, powerful results of happiness and sadness. It can be seen in the loving gesture of a mother, the strong, caring, and protective gestures of the father, and the stern and firm guiding gestures of your teachers. All of these natural mudras of power produce, inhibit, and magnify the flow of pranas. Mudra yoga help to enhance your attitude by bringing about a clearer level of concentration and increasing your sensory perception. Mudra yoga is a form of yoga that is practiced with all the major yoga systems. Most knowledge on mudra yoga is secret and is not allowed to be given to the general public, and is only given through initiation. Mudra yoga techniques are very potent and yield fast results. This is why the majority of the knowledge is kept secret and away from the general public. Excuse me. Most of the mudras that are secret are those mudras that work along with mantras. These are mudras that work best with various types of ancient rituals that give man access to a tremendous amount of raw Shakti power for short periods of time to perform a task or mission of some type. More information on the subject, read Chapter 8, Mudra Yoga Methods of Pranic Manipulation. Increasing the flow of prana through reverent speech. When I was a child, I had the privilege of listening to a lecture tape, Dynamic Prayer Brings Results, by Dr. George King, the founder and president of the Aetherius Society. My father brought the lecture tape to help train my siblings and I on how to invoke this power of prayer. Dr. George King gave a brilliant lecture on this subject of prayer. He lays out the simple keys to this mystic dynamic prayer method. One of the major keys to unlocking and controlling the pranic flow in this technique is developing a reverent tone of speech when using this form of prayer. Dr. King explained this in such simple terms that anyone could understand it, something that he was excellent at doing, mainly because of his superior knowledge of many subjects. Later, I would learn the mystic knowledge behind this power of speech that can be described as follows. Number one, the Kundalini in the base of spine chakra, Muladhara chakra, is dormant through the action of revealing the Shiva power that has driven it to this base point. At this Muladhara chakra point, the dormant Kundalini releases a para sound that becomes the vehicle of consciousness for the soul. The para sound is the soundless sound of consciousness. It is the beginning of the soundless whispers of the divine spark radiating from the spirit and screaming through the soul to initiate consciousness. Number two, this para sound, soundless sound, seeds the power consciousness by modifying its sound into pasyanti sound, the visible state of sonic vibration that enters the manifested world as the first thought configuration, the place where consciousness takes up residence and formulates its initial creative mental images. The holy sound vibration, pasyanti, makes its first movement through the sex chakra into the solar plexus chakra, where it manifests its power to formulate the mental directives that produce the design specification for man's subconscious mind. Number three, the pasyanti sound consciousness moves upward and transforms itself into madhyama sound consciousness. It is here where this level of sound builds motion before it solidifies into gross audible sound. This initial power of sound consciousness continues its journey by modifying itself from the pasyanti sound located at the solar plexus center in the heart center, Anahata chakra, giving inner meaning to its movement. It is here where the naming of this sabda power occurs. It is here where this sound power manifests its ability to mold the mind and cosmic energies into shapes by forming the subtle bodies of man. This subtle sound manifests the material to build the mental world. It is the signature configuration of the etheric bodies, mental bodies, pranic bodies, and astral bodies. This is the final step, number four. This is the final step in the 4 levels of graduated sound. It is the solidification of sound in gross, intelligent form. At this level, consciousness exists in several realms of existence: the casual or superconscious realm, the etheric realms, the mental realms, the astral realms, and the physical realm. This wave of Vakati sound represents the gross aspect of consciousness as gross speech and gross physical body. This sound Shakti power, Sabda Shakti, is located in the throat center, Vishuddha chakra. Vakati Sabda is the corresponding gross aspect of the subtler forms extending from the Madhyama mental configuration. We can see these powerful forces at play in a true analysis of gross spoken speech. Spoken speech is a physical vehicle for thought. Organized thought is a subtler form of sound that resides in the inner subtle realms of man's mind. A coherent, gross, audible sound that expresses itself with words that makes sentences to convey messages outside the mental framework of your inner thoughts is the vehicle that subtle sound uses to project its subtle forms to the gross realms of existence. Sound represents organized movement. Number 5, the physical force is a direct result of the power of Kundalini, releasing a sound vibration that breathes life into the subtle bodies and physical bodies that firmly implants the consciousness into the subtle mental pranic bodies and physical body within the realms of earth. In other words, these subtle mantric sound vibrations radiating from a dormant state of Kundalini are a stream of raw conscious material that configures a matrix of vital and mental energies within and throughout the auric body of substance. That matrix of vital and mental energies intersects at each of the 108 chakra vortex centers and creates an elaborate state of consciousness on the surface and throughout the layers of the soul's auric body of substance, conscious states of mind. These superconscious states of mind are 1, an active state of superconscious mind, 2, the superconscious mind, 3, the subconscious mind, and 4, the unconscious mind, and 5, the conscious mind. Number 6, the physical voice is the fourth aspect of consciousness. The sound vibration released from Kundalini, a vehicle of consciousness for the soul, modifies itself 3 times before its fourth stage, which produces the physical body that gives manifestation to physical sound as we know it. Number 7, the sound vibrations or nada are released from the Kundalini in its dormant state. It releases a soundless sound that is called a hara sound. The Kundalini is formed by the soul through a full manifestation of the Shakti power through an inner channel of the Sushumna Nadi called the Brahma Nadi, a pure state of Brahmic flow of Shakti consciousness while embedded in the original auric body of substance. The soul, working through the auric body of substance in a superconscious state, manipulates the Shakti power to align itself within the inner channel of Sushumna with the Brahmic Nadic line of force from the Ajna chakra down to the Muladhara chakra space realm of existence, where the Shakti power becomes Kundalini, an energy configuration with 3.5 coils. Oh, we're done. Probably should have read slower. Oh, well, that's it. That's it for chapter 10. I didn't think I'd get through it that quickly. If you would like further information, particularly on the points we just covered regarding mind, that was point number 5. Yes, point number 5. Prior talking about the levels of mind, there is a lecture by Dr. George King, cloud.aetherius.org, Man's Mind. Here it is. Oh, it's actually one of the free lectures. Let me swap really quick. So can everyone see my web browser, the Mozilla window? Let me check really quick to make sure.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. Here, if you go to cloud.aetherius.org, there are 3 lectures here on the homepage that are available to listen to for free. Man's Mind is one of them, which is one I was going to recommend after reading through those sections. Levels of Consciousness, Part 1, and How to Develop Your Clairvoyant Powers. This lecture is an hour, 20 minutes. Let's see. Man's mind. So we use only a fraction of our mind potential. Unlocking its potential will change our whole lives, bringing spiritual success, fulfillment, and joy. By understanding the different facets of the mind, we begin to discover how to make the best use, how to make the best use of our mental bodies and enjoy healthier, happier lives. Most important of all, by maximizing our mental faculties, we are better able to help others in need. This lecture explains clearly and concisely the essential foundations of mystical psychology. So you're welcome to go to cloud.aetherius.org and listen to this lecture for free. What do you think, Nehemiah? I think we can play an extract.
It's up to you. Unless people have other questions.
Yeah. So we have a question here, and we'll address your questions, and I'll play maybe 15, 20 minutes That's an extract. I mean, it's here for free, so why not? Question. Can you tell me more deeply about the law of karma and how we should follow it?
Well, the law of karma, I think, is very simple in the sense that it's actually the law of action. Every action we make is governed by the laws of karma. And most people, most thinking people, they know when they're doing the right thing. And and if they're not doing the right thing, it seems as though they are alerted by their inner self. But the law of karma is right, is all right actions. And it's could be all wrong actions too. A lot of people don't like to hear that, but what it does, as Dr. George King stated, that it's pressure towards conformity. Because no matter what you do, the law of karma will push you back on the right road towards uniting yourself with your higher self, which is God itself. So it always pushes you back towards that. So the karma or karma yoga is the laws that govern all actions. And the fool is those who seek to do wrong to someone else in order to gain a higher level. Because the only thing they're doing is binding themselves and slowing their own progress up. Because the pressures of their reward, their reward would be the pressures of karma to push them back on the right road by going through multiple levels of probably terrible experiences. So there's many books written on the laws of karma, but that's a simple way, I think, to understand what the law is. And another simple way, as I told you before, study nature, study those beings that's higher than us, because they have to follow the law. They choose to follow the law, and that's what keeps them in their high state of consciousness. One of the things we're told that once a master raised Kundalini to the Christ center or Arjuna chakra, he or she understand that every thought and every action must be governed and must be done within the strict rules of the laws of karma. And this is why they tell us that in that state, once they reach that state of consciousness, they pull the animated aura that everyone sees, every psychic sees. Everyone sees it, really, they just don't notice it. But the light that forms around the body, they even control that, which is called the aura. They pull that light back within them and utilize it in the right way, so that there's no pollution, there's no negative pollution being pushed back out of the body through the chakras that can negatively affect anyone else. They control even that so that they produce spiritual energy, uplifting energy. They modify every little aspect of their existence. When they tell the story of the Lord Babaji, they say he seems to sit in one place most of the time. But of course, his consciousness is a cosmic consciousness that takes up space all over the earth and probably the solar system, or even further. But he calculates his every movement on any plane of existence that he chooses to work on or operate on. And that's because they strictly govern their karma or their thoughts and actions. So if we study nature, we'll notice how the laws of karma work. And it's everything. It's everything. Don't think that it's, you doing good here and not doing bad here. It's every little thing. It's H2O. That's the law of karma. It's the laws of thermodynamics. That's the laws of karma. And if you study the laws of karma, you'll notice that the great masters, if you study thermodynamics, you'll notice that the great masters hundreds, thousands of years ago quoted those laws. And the scientists of the day only adopted them under their banner, under their titles, because they understood the laws of karma. So it's just not good and evil, just not wrong and right. It's producing the right amount of spiritual energy to help everyone uplift themselves so that we can pull ourselves out of this gross negative state of consciousness that we all live in. I hope that's understandable.
Okay. If anyone has any further questions or comments, you can go ahead and post that in the chat, and we'll address those for you. Okay, well, for the last, let's say, 45 minutes or so of today's session, we will listen to about 40 minutes of the lecture, Man's Mind. And I'll invite everyone again to check out the Aetherius Cloud at cloud.aetherius.org, where you can listen to all of the lectures, well, most of the lectures that are available from Dr. George King. As well, I also invite you to head over to our website, mysticknowledge.org, where you can find many sources and books and information made available for you free. Uh-oh. I hope the server's not down. Oh. Okay, yeah, there we go. It's working. All right, this is the mystickknowledge.org is the webpage of the International Mystic Knowledge Center. And here in the ebook library are sources or books that you can download for free by authors that we have vetted and recommend. And I mentioned several months ago that I wanted to do a study of these texts, do a reading and a study of them. And I do plan to eventually get back to that. I remember when I first started attending classes under Nehemiah 14, 15 years ago, I saw. He was doing a series on the teachings of Helen P. Blavatsky. And I was completely lost. I had no idea what he was talking about. So now, 15 years later or so, I've decided to go back and study the teachings of Helen Blavatsky. And they're much more understandable now, thankfully, due in large part to Nehemiah's tutelage and patience over the past decade and a half. Currently reading Isis Unveiled, and then I'll move into the Secret Doctrines. That's in my own personal study, but I invite you all to work through that as well. Reason being, after we finish the review of those earlier lessons, I would like to go back to that very first lesson that I attended under Nehemiah Davis as one of the series that we covered. So well, that particular class was not recorded because I was first there, but since then he has done a series on the Theosophy, always touched on it a couple of times. And so I would like to go back over that series, as well as invite everyone to take a look at these texts. They can be difficult and hard to follow, not just from the authorship of Helen Blavatsky, the way that she writes, the style that she writes, and the word usage that she employs, particularly from around that time. But if you can't make your way through it, you'll get quite a lot from these two bodies of work, at the very least, Isis Unveiled and the Secret Doctrines, but also in all of her works, including the work of Annie Besant, Yogic Matraka, and so forth. Yogic Matraka is the one, his works, or their works, I plan to resume the audiobook series with, as well as may offer for some supplemental lessons on in the future. We'll see how that works out. But like I mentioned, I'm currently working through Isis Unveiled. I invite all of you to, attempt it, be it hard or not. And then when we get around to that body of work that Nehemiah gave, lecturing on some theosophical teachings, we'll come back to these texts and try and do a deep dive into them, as well as many others. So there are other authors here on the mysticknowledge.org website. You can click around. Oops, wrong one. Find some of the books: Maple Columns, Shri Ramaprasad, Swami Vivekananda, and others. And you're free to download and study those texts. And it would be nice to have a study book group, a book study group, reading book together, make our way through all of these teachings, and study these teachings for the many years to come. So you have plenty of resources available. All right. So let's go ahead and listen to a few minutes of Man's Mind lecture. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll try to answer those as we go through the material together. All right, let me make sure I have it set to share sound, stereo. All right, let me know if you guys are able to hear it, or if we need me to turn it up a bit more.
Good. Now, to get on to the question of mind. Some men have a mind And some men have an excuse
Can everyone hear the
for
audio?
a mind. And yet no man,
Yeah,
there
you can
isn't a
hear it.
man with a mind. Mind substance itself is an all-pervasive energy which is virtually outside of the body and is not contained in the body in any place. When we refer to mind, we don't necessarily refer to the brain, but more a portion of the brain's function. We all know, I think, and I've mentioned this many, many times, that the brain of man is rather like a pin cushion. When you push a pin into a pin cushion, you make a hole, and the next time you push a pin through that self-same hole, it's easier than it was the first time. When you, the higher part of yourself, think a particular series of thoughts, when you do it for the first time, it's a lot more difficult than when you do it for the second and third and fourth time. In other words, you are making a channel through the brain so that mind can enter. If you regard mind as such, as being an all-pervasive energy or a force or a power outside of yourself, you regard the brain that you have as being a receiving set, and you regard yourself as being the master of this receiving set, then you get more of a true idea of the potency of brain and mind. You can twist certain little knobs in your brain and make your brain receive highly elevated spiritual thoughts. You can twist other knobs and your brain will receive baser thoughts. The difference between an advanced man and an ordinary man is that one has control of his brain and thinking capacity, and the other has not so much control. It is this control that makes the difference. Now, as you no doubt can see, we could give one series of classes alone on this one subject, because all our action is tied up in this one particular little bundle. Well, it's a rather large bundle, really. We haven't time to do that, so I'll try to give you information which will be of help. If you were suddenly to be transported to the moon, and say that you hadn't any trouble with breathing and you had plenty of food there and a special place built for you, just say that this happened, you would then still think the same thoughts that you can in Los Angeles or wherever else you live. The mind substance surrounding the moon is the same mind substance which surrounds this earth. The pressure, the outside pressure of that mind substance surrounding the moon is the same as the outside pressure of mind substance surrounding this earth. If you were an adept on this earth and you went to the moon, you would be an adept there. You wouldn't lose any of your abilities. So you see that mind is all pervasive. You might have heard this thought, this expression many times in some kind of vague reference. But I want to try and really impress upon you the allness of mind, or this vast energy which surrounds all things, which is in and passes through all things. Give you an illustration. The main difference between this paper and this spoon is a result of mind. This paper is made up of 5 types of energy. There are only 5 major types of energy on this world that we possibly know of, and there are 5 minor types as well. But the minor types are connected, directly connected to the 5 major types. These 5 major types of energy come from the sun. The minor types of energy may come from other sources, but we're most concerned with the major types. They are what the yogis call the pranas, P-R-A-N-A-S. The word prana means, of course, a universal life force. You might say, well, how can it come from the sun and be universal? It comes, shall we say, through the sun, from a universal supply. The thing that made the sun made the pranas. Now the pranas are not mind, but mind substance or mind energy molds the pranas. Difference again between this paper and that spoon is that the mind of this paper holds the pranas in a certain way, and the mind of that spoon holds the pranas in another way. You might have heard of this before, but I don't think you've ever heard it described as simply. Now, if you really think what I'm doing tonight is throwing out thoughts, not trying to convince you of anything, but throwing out thoughts so that you can let your brain travel down these thoughts and pick up many apples off the fruit trees on the way. If you regard everything in this light, you will begin to understand things a lot better. Instead of looking at anything as being an inanimate object and looking at another thing as being an animate object, look at those 2 objects as both having mind, having energy, but one being in a different state than another, one being in a different vibration than another, and one being on a different ladder of evolution than another. And then gradually you will begin to understand things and understand your own latent mental abilities. Now, as far as man is concerned, there are 3 major aspects of mind: the subconscious, the conscious, and the super-conscious. Very basic psychology has not yet begun to recognize the super-conscious, only in a very, very vague way. The metaphysician knows more about the super-conscious than he probably does about the subconscious. I'll tell you very briefly the functions of these three major types. Now we have here our little drawings which will help you. The subconscious, conscious, and superconscious. Those are the three major aspects of your mind. Now the subconscious governs physical functions. Functions, not physical actions. The conscious governs mental and physical action, and the superconscious governs inspiration, intuition, and so on. So here we have function, action, and inspiration. There is no doubt that the subconscious mind is the largest part of man's mind. The superconscious part is physically the smallest part. That part of the brain which attracts the subconscious vibrations is much, much larger than that part of the brain which attracts the superconscious vibrations. Strange as it might seem, this is true. Although the superconscious inspirations, intuitions, and so on are above, very, very much above, from a point of view of evolution, above the subconscious, nevertheless, the superconscious is only handled by a small part of the brain. We're now talking about the ordinary man. The extraordinary man is different. Come to that later on. Now, what do we mean by physical function? Well, it's pretty plain. We mean things like the digestion and disposition of food, for one. The subconscious part of the brain is able to weigh something like 1,000th part of a gram of vitamin B1 and send it to a certain section of glands. It's able to, when the body is wounded, it's able to call into action an army of microbes and send them, in this case through the blood, to combat any outside microbes. It's able to form a skin across that wound so that the blood will not leak away, and also to protect the innermost parts of the body from outside intrusion by foreign bacteria. The subconscious part of the brain knows far more about physical function than the conscious part of the brain of almost anybody on the earth. I've always said that the subconscious part of a bird knows far more about the its own body and the human body than the conscious part of the brain of some of our finest doctors and so on. There's no doubt about this. It is correct, and anybody who really understands it can see immediately that it must be correct. Here is a mechanism which operates according to very set laws, very, very set laws, and it will, unless interfered with, it will operate in the best possible way in order to build up the body and keep it fit. Now I said unless interfered with. How can it be interfered with? Well, in many, many ways. The metaphysician, when he begins to study, he learns, probably before anything else, that he should not harbor so-called negative thoughts. And he begins to discover, when he stops himself from harboring these kind of thoughts, he begins to discover almost immediately that he feels better in health, better mentally, more alert, and certainly happier. He begins to discover this almost at once. He begins to discover that, probably, if he's got the right teacher, that these negative thoughts, so-called, were actually interfering with the subconscious aspect of his thinking processes. And the subconscious mind will answer to this, and it'll also answer to the opposite. A person who is optimistic, who is happy, who is positive, is a person who generally, even if they are ill, recuperates very quickly. And the more positive you are, the more dynamic you are, the greater the powers of recuperation you have. You can be very ill today and fit tomorrow. The negative type of thinker can be very ill today and very ill this time next year and have exactly the same complaint. There's no doubt at all about this. What are they doing? They are interfering with, they are impairing, holding up the subconscious mind by feeding it negative suggestion. The dynamic person, the more positive person, the more optimistic person is building up the subconscious mind by feeding it with positive suggestion. And it works, and nothing works quicker than this. Really, it does work. We're not paying lip service to something which has been spoken about so many times by so many hundreds of thousands of words all over the world. Not paying lip service to this. This is something which really does exist. You can prove it for yourself, as you all know. Even the thoughts and expressions of another person affect your subconscious for good or bad. Naturally, you try not to let them affect your subconscious for bad, but if it's good, you let them affect it. You play the role of discriminator in this case. You know, many times you have been with people who are extremely negative, and you come out and you have to fight with yourself for a time. Other than that, you would harbor some of the negative thoughts that they have put out, and they have given you, the negative suggestions, which not only have they given themselves, but they've tried to pass them on to you too. And if you did harbour such negative suggestions, your health would suffer quickly, very quickly. One of the finest brain medicines in the world was, I won't say discovered, but was used by a French psychologist, and that is this. He said, for 10 minutes a night before you sleep, repeat to yourself firmly, day by day, in every way, I am getting better and better and better and better. You've heard it 100 times. Have you tried it? If you do, you will find that it's extremely good. Why? Because you are sending these impulses down into the subconscious mind, and you are instructing the subconscious mind to get better and better and better and better in every way. And just as the subconscious will listen to negative thoughts, so also will it listen to positive thoughts. In fact, it almost likes listening to positive thoughts best, because don't forget, its main action, its main function is that of building up the body. It's a very brilliant part of the mind, is this, inasmuch as it never, never, never forgets. I'll go further than the science of mind by hundreds of thousands of years and say that the subconscious part of the man's thinking processes is that part which remembers all things through all lives, through all lives. It has a wonderful filing system, inasmuch as it can file away memory of events, happenings, suggestions, and so on. And these can be brought into the conscious mind again with the right process, which we'll go into a little later on. So therefore, the subconscious, number one, does exist. There are some people who are almost afraid of this term because they've been given such highfalutin ideas and weird and wonderful ideas of it. The subconscious part does exist. It is absolutely essential. It's a very, very brilliant aspect of mind. If it's not unduly interfered with negative thoughts and suggestions, it will work for you in a very, very good way, strictly according to law. The conscious part of the brain is something which has an idea, which is erroneous, that it is the master of the castle. Now, probably you have heard that the masters have said in the past, and if they haven't, a very ordinary countryman like myself has done, that man's worst enemy is the conscious thinking process, or commonly called the conscious mind, and it is so. It's the worst enemy of you all, unless you control it. Then it is not your best friend, but it is a friend, a necessary traveling companion, shall we put it like that. Now, the conscious part of the brain, we have gone into many times how to bring about control over this. This too is susceptible to all kinds of happenings and suggestions. It is that part of the brain which governs physical action. Before you move, you think. Even if you move in a split second, you think before you move. The conscious part of the brain sends instructions for the subconscious part of the brain to activate certain nerves, send energy to certain muscles in order to move your legs so that you can move. The conscious part of the brain gives orders to the subconscious, which you might almost say does the work. One great scientist, one of the greatest scientists who's ever lived in this past 200 or 300 years, Sir Oliver Lodge, said that no man can explain exactly what happens when I move my little finger. And it is so. It's absolutely correct. You couldn't explain exactly what's happened. But you can say that the conscious and the subconscious together work, in this case in harmony, and they don't always work in harmony, but this is one case, so that you can move your little finger. If they didn't work in harmony, the conscious mind could not move your little finger. I'm talking about the conscious mind of an ordinary man. The conscious mind of a great man, yes, but not the conscious mind of ordinary man. So the conscious mind becomes then, to ordinary man, an important aspect of mind, providing always it is controlled, and providing always it is reminded that it is not master of the castle, but it is a servant therein. There are hundreds of people walking about Los Angeles tonight and every other city who will probably be a few lives before they really realize that one point. Again, we have the analogy, the difference between the advanced man and the ordinary man is the ordinary man is a conscious individual. The advanced man is a super-conscious individual. The ordinary man is governed by impulses sent through the basic senses, through the conscious mind into the subconscious mind. The advanced man is he who is governed by impulses he attracts through at least 9 senses, via the superconscious, via the conscious, into the subconscious. So the control of the conscious also brings about a control of the subconscious. Sometimes this is done unwittingly. For instance, you're walking along and you suddenly step aside and a brick from a building falls down. Now, you haven't looked up and seen the brick. This has happened many times, but you've had some kind of a feeling you must step aside, and you've been forced aside. In this way, it's possible that some higher sense denoted the brick coming down, sent a message through the conscious into the subconscious, back to the conscious again, back into the subconscious again. Double relay must be, so as to enable you to move aside, and the brick comes down with a crash. Have another case where you're walking along, but you look up this time and you see a brick coming down, and you move aside, maybe in time, maybe not. Let's hope that it's in time. You move aside. This case, I've given one the case of an evolved man and the other a case of a less evolved man. In this case of the less evolved man, he looks up, the message comes through the eyes, nerves, to the conscious, into the subconscious, move, back into the conscious again, back into the subconscious again, and he moves. So you're gradually now, no doubt, beginning to see the tie-up between the two aspects of mind and the dependence of one on another. I said the conscious mind was your worst enemy. It is, but not if it is controlled. Only if it controls the castle, as it were, then it becomes the worst enemy. Then it becomes basic man. If the conscious mind, too, is apt to be promiscuous at times, and will often take the line of least resistance, because pain is felt not only by the subconscious but most acutely by the conscious part of the mind, and it doesn't like pain, so it will often take the line of least resistance in order to avoid pain of all kinds. It'll often get itself into greater pain by taking this line of least resistance, by the way. Let me give you an illustration of what I mean. This is true. A person came to me in England with very bad trouble in the hip, just down here. In fact, so bad she couldn't walk. In those days I used to give a little clairvoyance. I was never very good at it. But I said to this person, I said, you know, this complaint can go back a long way, in as much as it started when you were a child. I said, were you ever told to visit some relatives you didn't want to visit? She said, oh yes. So I said, that is the start of your hip trouble. The conscious part of the mind didn't like the idea of visiting these relatives, maybe rightly so. So it sent instructions to the subconscious part of the mind to bring up an excuse why she shouldn't visit these relatives. And that woman became a cripple, a total cripple. Now this is what can happen and does happen. It's happening to thousands of people every minute throughout the earth. You see, now had that person, of course she was a child in those days, but had she controlled the mind and said, well, I will visit these relatives, I don't like to do it, I don't like the people, I don't want to do it, but you are going to visit these relatives, conscious mind, whether you like it or not, as a discipline, as a lesson. Had she done that, that woman would be alive today and she would be able to walk, and there isn't any doubt of it. So when I say that the conscious mind can be an enemy, that's the kind of way I mean it. It can be a friend, too, a great friend, if it is controlled in the right way. Now, what about the superconscious?
Okay. I'll stop there. Right before he gets to the superconscious mind. If you guys would like to listen to the remainder of the lecture, you're more than welcome to do that. You can go to cloud.aetherius.org, and right on the home page, listen now for free, and the Man's Mind lecture is a third option there. So, do we have any final questions or comments before we close out today's session? I hope that lecture helped you guys a bit to understand better the contents of what we're covering in the prayer series and in many of the lectures too that Nehemiah has given throughout the years. I do invite you to go back to the Atheist Society, study their teachings as well as the ancient teachings, which are made available to you for free on our website, mysticknowledge.org. So the only cost to you will probably be cost for internet service and a subscription fee that you'd have to pay for the Ethereum cloud. Very minimal in comparison to what is being made available to you and the benefit you'll gain from it. All right, is there anything you want to add, Nehemiah, before we close out today?
No, unless they have any questions, I answer.
All right, if there's no further questions, then let us close out today's session reciting the New Lord's Prayer. And again, if there's any questions or comments you may have that you weren't able to pose in today's live session, you're more than welcome to send us an email, mystickknowledgecenter, all one word, @gmail.com. And you could let us know if you want us to answer the question privately via email, or if you're okay with us addressing it publicly in a subsequent session. Also, do be on the lookout for an announcement of the Mystic Prayer Technique Seminar workshop, which will be coming up in November. You can go back to the beginning of the class, maybe middle of the class, around the beginning, where I kind of laid out roughly our agenda for the remainder of October and November. We should finish up chapter 11 next session. Then after that, we'll do a study of the New Lord's Prayer and the Prayer for Spiritual Workers. And then it's the in-person seminar. And I think that'll wrap up our classes for 2024. We may do another couple Q&A open discussion sessions just to tie up any loose ends or to address any questions or comments you may have. But then that should take us into December and into 2025. If there's no questions, then let us recite the New Lord's Prayer. The New Lord's Prayer. O divine and wondrous Spirit, O everlasting Lord of hosts, send forth now through me thy great and lasting power. Allow me, Almighty God, the lasting privilege of radiating to all the world thy great love, so that those who suffer may be given the power and energy to rise above their weaknesses. Almighty God, in great humility do I ask you to send forth your power to give to me this great lasting privilege of being a channel, so that my suffering brothers may be helped and guided and healed and lifted into thy light, so that they who know not may look up, and in doing so receive to their higher selves your divine counsel. Almighty God, this day have you granted me a divine privilege. I ask you now to give to me the strength, so that never again will I turn from my inner vision of you. Oh, great peace, great peace, great peace. In praise of your greatness, O God, doth my soul sing. Grant it energy to sing on forever and forever. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for your kind attendance and participation. Again, do check out our website, mysticknowledge.org, for additional resources and texts made available to you for free to peruse, study, and digest. If you do have any questions or comments, you can send it to us via email, mystickknowledgecenter@gmail.com. If for anything else, we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Have a wonderful week and take care.